As I'm sure everyone has heard by now, the spirits company Luxco was recently purchased by MGP. This is a pretty big deal. These are two giants of American distilling coming together and forming some sort of massive, ginormous whiskey zord, or like a whiskey version of that amorphous blob from Akira. And there are a lot of people who are talking about the implications for this and what they think is going to happen in the future with the brands that Luxco owned now that they're in the MGP fold. And I've been thinking on this. I've been thinking about this quite a bit the past few days. And I have some opinions, some thoughts on the situation. In particular, I have thoughts about why MGP decided to do this in the first place. And a big part of why I think they did it is reflected in the state of their own personal brands. So my name is Ed, this is the Rock Gut Review, and today you're gonna get a whole bunch of me opining about the MGP Luxco merger. Let's strap in. Before I get into the topics I really want to talk about with the MGP Luxco merger, I should acknowledge that a very large part of why MGP is acquiring Luxco is their infrastructure. It is the sales team. It is the distribution relationships that they have. This is a company that has deep partnerships. It has international brands. It's got connections. That is huge for MGP. It's going to allow them to put their products in a lot more hands, in a lot more stores. That said, I don't necessarily think that that distribution infrastructure and that sales infrastructure necessarily makes up for some of the problems I'm going to be talking about with their brands. And for the reasons I'm about to talk about, that's why I think them picking up these brands from Luxco may be just as important as them picking up the sales and distribution infrastructure. So first thing we got to talk about, Midwest Grain Products, MGP. They've been making whiskey for other people for ages now in the old Seagram's distillery. Famous for their rye whiskey, the 95% rye, 5% malt mash bill. Everybody knows about that. They're famous for selling bourbon, light whiskey, whatever you want. They will sell it to you and you can bottle it in your own name. Tons of brands either got their start this way while they were waiting for their own distillate to age, or are just going all in on sourcing from MGP. Sourcing whiskey is nothing new in the whiskey game. People have been doing it for centuries at this point. Difference is, of course, that MGP is doing it on a massive, inhuman scale. But recently, MGP also started putting out whiskey under their own brands, particularly Rossville for their rye and Remus for their bourbon. So I've got a little single barrel pick of Remus right here. This is the Thrilla in Vanilla from my shop. You guys know I love boxing references, so obviously I had to buy one of these. And I gotta tell you, this thing is a failure. I don't mean it's a failure in that it's bad whiskey though. This is good whiskey. It's fine bourbon. It's vanilla-y, it's tannic, high proof. You know I love that. It's good stuff. And I'm not saying it's a complete failure in terms of sales. It sells. But the problem is, it could be selling a lot better. And in that regard, I draw comparisons between, say, this Remus single barrel we've done and other single barrels we've done from other brands. Because Remus, this particular single barrel of Remus, very good whiskey, you know, made by a very talented group of people, has been sitting on our shelves for months. We sell some, but it's not moving. It's not got a really high demand. This is not a hot ticket item. Compare that to, say, our new one. This is Whiskey Magic from Woodford Reserve. Selling pretty damn well. I don't think we're gonna have a lot of this in a month's time. Or even fucking like Four Roses single barrel. Man, we had motherfuckers fighting us trying to get this shit. Seriously. People were calling up the shop before this was even on the fucking shelf saying, "Where's your Four Roses? I know you got Four Roses. Give me some goddamn Four Roses single barrel. I know you got it. People were rabid. Not so much for old Remy here. And of course, aside from these single barrels that my company picked, you can also compare this and the hype around this to the hype of MGP sourced products. And some of those MGP sourced products are getting a lot more love than their own brand. Now there is a caveat here, of course. That is that when we got in the Remus Volstead Act Reserve bottles, those sold crazy quick, like hotcakes. So there is some interest in the brand, but I think the reason those Volstead bottles sold a lot quicker comes down to something else I'll talk about a little bit later in the video. So MGP is making good whiskey. Why does it seem to be ignored? And what does that have to do with it buying Luxco? Let me tell you. I think the problems facing MGP's personal brands are threefold. The first problem I think they're running into is the knowledge of the average consumer. So on WhiskeyTube, a lot of us know quite a bit about the inner workings of the whiskey industry, right? I'm no expert. I don't claim to be an expert about any topic whatsoever. But nonetheless, a lot of us like to nerd out and learn a lot about each and every particular thing about the whiskey we drink, as much as possible. That is probably not true of the average person who is either just getting into whiskey or is buying whiskey on a lark or for a family member or a friend or whatever. Somebody who is just walking into a liquor store and looking at the whiskey aisle. And if you're doing that, you have no fucking idea what MGP produced. You don't know that fucking maybe this Whistle Pig has some goddamn MGP in it. You don't know if this Smooth Ambler has MGP in it. You don't fucking know one way or the other. All you know is this brand name and whether or not you like the whiskey when you drink it. And maybe those consumers are going to go out and find out more and find out, oh, it's made by this place in Indiana, Midwest, whatever the fuck. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they don't. Maybe they get attached to this brand because they really like it. It's really good. Cool. I'm gonna drink it. And to be fair, they may get attached to that brand in particular because of whatever that brand is doing with MGP's distillate. They may be doing something really cool. Maybe they're blending it a certain way. Maybe they're finishing it a certain way. Whatever they're doing, it could be really awesome. But at the same time, there's a good chance they may never know what the fuck an MGP is. That brings me to point 2, is the issue of MGP and the personality of their brand. Now I'm no marketing guy. I didn't go to school for marketing. I don't know how to sell shit, which is why this channel is so small. Subscribe, by the way. And also, why don't you buy a Rot Gut Review t-shirt? Links are in the description. But the issue there with the personality of the brand, really, is that MGP itself, Midwest Grain Products, is the most faceless megacorp name fucking ever. I mean, the whiskey might as well be made by IBM. So now MGP has to come up with brands. They gotta come up with brands. Remus and Rossville Union, they want names and brands that people can relate to, right? Because that is what sells whiskey. People want to latch onto a brand. They want something personal. They want a person or a thing or something, some idea, some symbol to latch onto to make them feel connected to this brand. I mean, that's why craft distilling is kind of fun, because you can go down the street, you can go to the distillery and meet the distiller themselves, get to know them. That's why people love going out to Kentucky, checking out those distilleries. They're bigger, they're huge, but that gives them that personal touch. And MGP is trying to move from faceless megacorp into the personal realm. They need to have a nice brand. Here's the thing though. Nobody knows who the fuck George Remus is. I mean, I do. I'm kind of a history nerd and I like Prohibition shit. But you know what? Most people don't. Most people don't follow a bunch of old fucking history when they're going back to buy this shit. They don't give a fuck that this guy's a bootlegger. They don't give a fuck, right? I mean, there are so many whiskeys out there that claim to be named after a moonshiner or a bootlegger or whomever at this point. Going with the bootlegger angle doesn't do anything for you. It really doesn't anymore. The market is saturated with motherfuckers talking about how their granddad was a bootlegger, moonshiner, rum runner, whatever the fuck. And so people aren't particularly responding to the brand as a whole. As far as they know, this is just one more brand sitting on the shelf. So that's why a lot of other brands that are using MGP stuff, right, they're doing pretty damn well for themselves. They've got a personal touch. People know the brand now. They've been operating for a few years. They got to know the brand's personality, so to speak. They know it's good whiskey. They know that. But it's also a good brand. And that brings me to my third point. There's another thing that drives people's interest and makes people want to buy something, and that's scarcity. And for the most part, that's not really helping out MGP either. You want to know what I get the most questions about at my liquor store? I bet you can guess. I bet you can guess right now. It's Buffalo Trace shit. Buffalo Trace, Weller, E.H. Taylor, Blanton's of course. I mean, people are always fucking asking about Blanton's. You know what all those things have in common? You can't fucking get them in Milwaukee. Yes, even the Buffalo Trace you can't find here. It's ridiculous. And I don't think those are the best whiskeys in the world. However, people have heard of them. And people have told them that they're good. And so they go and buy it. And then there's not that much. So they get excited and they're like, well, if it's rare, it must be amazing and I'm gonna go buy some. And then other people who can't get it wanna try it. And so they get all hyped. And then they wanna go buy some. And then there's nothing for anyone and everyone loses their goddamn minds. You know what one thing MGP is? It's goddamn plentiful. There is so much of it. There's rarity in the brands they source to, right? You can make a brand out of MGP stuff, and that particular brand will, of course, be scarce. So people will want to go out and buy that particular expression. But MGP? Fuck, we're swimming in MGP. And that brings us, finally, to the Luxco merger. So what does Luxco bring to the table? Because when I heard about MGP buying them, I was like, I thought about it from the Luxco side of things, right? Where I'm thinking, okay, what have they been doing? They've been sourcing from Heaven Hill, but those contracts are up, so not really cutting any ties there. They recently started Lux Row, right? Where all their whiskey brands are under Lux Row. And let's face it, Lux Row is really what MGP is interested in. I don't think they really give a fuck about, Everclear, or whatever other brands Luxco owns. They're interested in that Lux Row shit. So they moved to make Lux Row, and they're trying to do their own distillation a little bit. However, now MGP came in. They're not gonna want Lux Row for their distillation. They don't need distillers. What they need is brands. And I said this on a stream before, I feel like shutting down Lux Row's own distillation shit is kind of like chopping off your nose to spite your face. But at the same time, I get it, right? You don't want them to be off doing their own thing. You want those brands. You want well-known, recognizable brands. Like Ezra. Yeah, Ezra's no luxury shit. Ezra's not some, highfalutin, super high price shit. But people know it. People know this name, and you can start making some highfalutin shit and putting it in these here bottles, and people will buy it because they recognize the name, they'll see the price tag, they'll see it's older or cooler or whatever the fuck, and they'll snap that shit up. Not to mention this motherfucker. You got Blood Oath. You got Blood Oath now, right? You got Lux Row, you got Blood Oath. Blood Oath is the exact opposite of this shit. This shit looks cool. It's called Blood Oath. That sounds metal. It comes in a sweet box. I love that box. Man, I want that box. I'll buy that bottle just to get that sweet looking box. It looks luxurious. It looks cool. Everybody wants some of this. It's limited. It's scarce. You want Blood Oath. And you're going to buy it. And you're going to buy it from MGP. And as much as MGP wants the infrastructure that Luxco has, the Luxco has, made over time, that they have access to, that's all well and good. But even more importantly, MGP wants the mental space that these brands occupy in the public consciousness. That's what they want. They want whatever amount of recognition and spotlight is on these brands. Then they can use that to sell more shit. That's the goal, right? You want to make headway into the general public's consciousness. You want this to be the spearhead that pushes into people's minds and goes, oh, hey, that's a brand I know. That's a brand I like. I've bought that before. I'm willing to take a chance on this bottle because it's a brand I've heard of. It's a brand I know. It's familiar. I'm not going to take a risk on this motherfucker over here. But maybe I will if I find out this other brand, this first brand that I know, Ezra, is related to this motherfucker over here. Oh, wait, the motherfuckers who make Ezra also make this shit? Oh, well, I'm suddenly not so scared to buy this shit. And that's the thing. People don't want to part with their hard-earned cash if they don't know they're going to get quality. So get a brand they already know, a brand they trust, fill it with your stuff, and have them buy it. And then they'll trust you. The question, of course, becomes, is everything going to be made in Indiana? Because if it is, then they're going to lose the cachet of the Kentucky part of the label, which maybe doesn't mean quite as much as it used to. Whiskey's made all over the country at this point. Are people as invested in everything being from Kentucky if they recognize the brand? Maybe, maybe not. I guess this will be an experiment to find out. So down in the comments, tell me what you think of this merger. Tell me what you think the future is for these brands and for MGP as a whole. I'd love to hear what you think. And while you're down there, why don't you like and subscribe? Helps us out a lot. So I'm going to toast to the death of Luxco. Luxco is dead. Long live Luxco. And you guys, stay rotten.